Hey everyone, welcome back to Speed and Grease. And if you're a first-time listener, I appreciate you taking the time to listen in on the show, and I really hope you enjoy it and keep coming back for more. This episode's guest is Pat Barrett. Pat has been a flagman in central Wisconsin for 33 years, but not only in central Wisconsin, even in some NASCAR series as well. And in this episode, he talks about that, and he also talks about what is it like being in the flag stand, what are some of the things you need to look for, and how do you handle when a driver doesn't like a call you made, or a fan's upset, or a crew member's upset with you. So we talk a little bit about that, and I also really enjoyed talking about the hobby, one of the main hobbies that Pat has, which is cribbage. He talks about the tournaments he's won and some of the strategic things that go into how do you be good at cribbage. Something I know very little about, so it was really cool to listen in on that and to get some insight as well. And I've always really thought his previous profession that he just retired from a few years ago is really interesting. He used to be an auctioneer, so he talks a little bit about that, some of the cool things they've found while auctioning off things from houses, and also how do you do that really awesome auctioneer chant. So he takes us behind the scenes into the inner workings of how to learn how to do that. And man, it was cool to learn those things. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and let's get into it. Well, Pat Barrett, welcome to the show, and thank you for coming.
Absolutely. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's I've been thinking about some of the things that you've been involved with. Not only flagging at a racetrack, but I think being an auctioneer is that's a super interesting thing, and in cribbage too. And I really look forward to talking about some of that stuff. And I guess kind of the first question is what does it take to be a good flag person at a racetrack?
You got to really be dedicated to it. I mean, it's a job where it starts in the spring and you go all summer, and it gets hot, and some of the days are long. But I grew up, my dad took me to the races. My first race was 1964 at Griffith Park in Wisconsin Rapids. And I was 3 years old, and I thought, oh, this is really fun. This is really an interesting thing. I've never seen anything like it. And, we just started going to the races at Griffith Park, Wisconsin Dells, over to La Crosse. My dad took me down to Slinger, Madison, all over the place. But it gets in your blood, obviously, that, and you just enjoy so much of it, meet so many people, and make a lot of friends. But the flagman part of it is dedication. It's something that I just thought, oh, this really looks interesting. I was going to the races all the time, and I thought, what would I like to do? A flagman job looks fun,
Sure.
And so when Darrel Bassuener bought Golden Sands in '92, he put an ad in the paper. He was looking for help. And I said, I think I'll apply for the flagman job. So I went out there in the afternoon, and he said, check back with me at 5 o'clock. They had a practice day, I think, for the drivers, and went back to this little trailer that he was sitting in. I said, well, what do you think? Any idea if I'm going to be the flagman? Did anybody else apply? And he's like, nope, you're the only one that applied. You got the job. I'm like, oh, great. Okay. So that shoved me into the flagman job back then. And at the same time, Luke Herring the same year bought the Dells Motor Speedway back then. From Larry Weirs. And he wanted me to come down and help him. So I started training with Dave Rodiger in the flag stand. And and then a couple of years later, Dave stepped back and became the pit steward. And Luke said, okay, well, you're the flagman now. So I was working there, and those two places for a few years, and then WIR called. They needed a flagman. They had trouble. So all of a sudden it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. So it's like, okay, well, I was self-employed with our auction company, and I thought, well, I can do that. And my wife was real supportive, and that was 33 years this year that became a flagman. But I still enjoy it for the most part. The hot days are the hardest days. Those are, when it gets to be in mid upper 90s, and the sun's beating down on you. It's like, oh, why am I doing this? But 95% of the time, it's still fun, and still enjoy it to the most part.
Yeah, when you're flagging all those tracks, summers fill up fast.
Summers go by in a hurry. I do Thursday night. That's almost a 90-mile drive. Then Friday at Golden Sands, which is just a few miles from my house, and then Dells is another hour. Come Sunday, it's like, how come I'm so tired, man? That's 3 nights in a row, and especially on the hot days, it wears you down. But still enjoy doing it. Now I'm just doing Golden Sands and Wisconsin Dells, and looking forward to the first race at the Icebreaker in the Dells. That's always a big kickoff for the season, and then Sand starts with their races, and the Memorial Day weekend's always a lot of fun. So yeah, just look forward to the season getting started, and have been doing that for a long time.
Yeah. So 3 years old, and you started going to Griffith Park. So you were born and raised in Wisconsin Rapids your whole life?
No, my brother and I were born in Berlin.
Okay.
But my dad got involved with a group of guys, and they started what was called the Advertiser back then, in the early 60s. And he was driving back and forth from Berlin to Wisconsin Rapids every day, and that's an hour. And finally, in '64, my mom and Dad just said, we need to move to Wisconsin Rapids. So boom, we all moved here. And I think my dad found out about the racetrack, he stopped at Johnny's Bar one day, and there was a guy sitting there, started talking to him, and it was Dick Trickle.
Oh, no kidding.
And it's like, holy cow, okay, Dad didn't know anything about racing around here at all. Dick's like, come out to the racetrack just south of town. It's a couple miles from here. So Dad went out there, met Dick Trickle, met your grandfather, met all the race drivers, and met a guy by the name of Alan Mall, Minnow Mall, and Minnow was the flagman.
Okay.
So they became friends, and fast forward to '68, the buyer's guide was sold, the Advertiser was sold, and Alan Mall talked my dad into going to auction school, so that's how we got involved in the auctions deal. But anyway, '64, started going to Griffith Park, a little flat quarter-mile racetrack. But as a 3-year-old kid, that's like Daytona now.
Yeah.
It was really, really fun for my brother and I to go and watch the cars go around back then.
Yeah, what a cool way to get introduced to racing. Dad not having much, knowing much about the racetrack or racing, and then end up going to the bar and meeting Dick Trickle, and hey, come on out and see what it's all about.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So then it was all the way up until 1992 until was your first time doing flagging.
Right. I actually, in high school, I'd go to the tracks with my dad, and I was really interested in keeping track of how the cars were, what position they were in.
Okay.
I got really good at that. I'd have my little yellow notepad, and I'd keep track of everything, and I'd compare it to the scores, and my finish was always the same as theirs. So I was a junior in high school, and they were looking for a scorer, and I think Phil Bickley was running the track, and I got hired as a scorer for 1 year out there, and I worked with Minnow Mall up in the tower back when they had the little tiny white tower,
Okay.
about as big as a bathroom.
Yeah.
It was just little. Worked with him for a year, and got to know how all the race, how the workings of the races went but then the track changed hands a few times, and it closed up for a while and all that. But when Darrel Bassuener bought it, that's when I really, really got involved in the flagman part of it.
Okay. Like even through, your younger years of, middle school, high school, where you and friends going to the races and stuff all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. We would go out to the tracks all the time, basically Golden Sands and Wisconsin Dells, maybe Marshfield once in a while, and down to Slinger and all that. But then we started stopping at Dick's shop a lot, as a junior, senior in high school. And
okay,
like, hey, I need some help. The guy's got to work on the car. Would you go to State Park with me? So he gave me a Super America shirt, and we wore the uniforms, and we even went down to I-70 Speedway in Odessa when I was just out of high school, and that was a great experience. That track is amazing and big and fast, and all the drivers from all over the United States went there to try to win the big Governor's Cup 400 race. And in 1980 we went down there with Dick, and he actually ended up winning that race. It was just a crazy crazy fun, wild time back then.
So from just having gotten the introduction with Dick at Griffith Park, as you got a little older, you just started stopping in at his race shop. And,
yeah.
Okay.
My dad became really good friends with him, and I actually remember as a boy, 8, 9 years old, Dick and Darlene, his wife, would stop at my mom and dad's house, and they'd have a few beers, and they'd play some cribbage. So it was like, wow, how crazy is that we journeyed on into playing in cribbage tournaments, working at racetracks, and all that stuff kind of all fell into place.
Yeah, I mean, at that young of an age, when Dick said, "Hey, here's a Super America shirt. Will you come to races with me?" Was that just like the coolest thing at that time?
It was like, he was one of the big stars of racing back then. He wasn't in NASCAR yet, but everywhere he went, everybody knew who Dick Trickle was, and he was the guy to beat. And he was just a fun time, a lot of hard work. But then afterwards, when the races were done, it was nothing but a great big party.
Yeah.
Always with Dick and all of his fans and crew members and all that. So
that's cool. What as you got into flagging, I mean, were you throwing right away like, hey, we're gonna have you flag Friday night, or did you get a little training before that actually?
No, when Darrel hired me, okay, this was probably I'd say mid-April or late April or whatever time of the year it was before the season actually started. He said, okay, you're the flagman, you make the decisions on what happens on the racetrack, you're ultimately there's nobody in the tower that's going to tell you what to do. Back then the flagman made the calls, and it was like, whoa, this is pressure.
That's a lot. Yeah,
it's a lot of pressure. You rely on your corner workers to help you if you miss something, or anybody who's in those positions on the racetrack, and they still do help figure out what happened on the racetrack. But that back then it was a lot of pressure. It was like, yeah, it's your decision, and if you make a wrong decision and a driver doesn't like it, you have to answer for it.
And you've probably never had a driver get upset.
quite a few, but
at that point, did you guys wear radios where you had any communication with the tower?
Yeah.
Okay, you still did. Okay.
Yeah, we had the headsets like we do. They're not as nice and comfortable and sophisticated as they are now, but we could talk to the tower, tell them who was going to the back, and who was involved, things like that, and you communicate with all the track safety workers around the track too, and all that. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I mean, what's it like to, because I think probably so many of us people that have spent time as a crew member or racer, you just gotta take for granted a lot of the things that are just going on at a racetrack, and just whether it's concession stands or scoring or corner working or running the tow truck, you kind of take for granted all the communication and coordination that's got to go on with things. Yeah, I mean, what is it like having that pressure of having to, hey, I'm controlling this race right now, and I'm having to keep an eye on all this stuff.
It took a few years to really feel comfortable. It's something that you're like, yeah, you've got the say so in everything that goes on in this racetrack. When the owner of the track hires you, or the series director hires you, he's hiring you because he thinks you're going to do a really good job. If you make a lot of mistakes, like in any job, you're not going to be very well liked, and you're probably not going to be able to keep doing that job, and unless you make 99% of the calls right, or more. So it's a lot of pressure, but you get a good group of people, like Golden Sands. I worked with Jerry Reinwan for close to 30 years, and I worked with Randy Botcher and guys like that. They know what they're looking for, and they know, like I said, most of the time that we make the right decisions. And if you don't, then fans will tell you you made a mistake, or drivers will tell you made a mistake, or the crew will come and tell you made a mistake. But just like an NFL referee, every once in a while, you make a mistake. But I think overall, everybody that works together at the tracks do a pretty good job.
Yeah. I just I think about all that, having that put on him. It's definitely a lot of decisions. And everything's happening fast. Everything that's happening for everything's going on fast for the racers, and then then you as well. How what are some of the toughest situations and calls that someone that's flagging ends up finding themselves in? What?
Well, I remember a call back at Dell's a few years ago when Jim Carlson was racing in a feature, and in front of him, like the middle of the pack, a couple of cars came together, and they looked like they were going to lose control. And he slammed on his brakes, turned to try to miss those guys who were losing control, and he spun out. And I said, 48, Jim Carlson goes to the back. He's like, and he stopped at the start-finish line, and he's just furious.
Yeah.
He's like, I spun to miss those guys who were crashing. I said, yeah, but Jim, those cars kept going, and you spun out. Yeah. And it took him a couple hours to understand where I was coming from. I said, if you wouldn't have spun out, there's no yellow. Those guys kept going, but he was so mad at me for that. And he even came. We were camping with my motorhome out in the parking lot. He came over, and my 4-year-old granddaughter was with me, and he was still swearing at me about that. And I don't remember if it was later that day or maybe the next week. He came up to me and he said, after I thought about that, he said that was the right call. But at the time, in the heat of the moment, he didn't think so.
Yeah, sometimes it takes a little while for some of that stuff to set in. But
yeah, and there's hard-nosed racers out there like Rocky Breezer. He was a tough one. Todd Stapleman. There was a few drivers that they didn't want to be told they made a mistake, but ultimately, nobody's perfect, and everybody has a run-in on the racetrack that they have to answer to. So
yeah, I think one of the, even as a racer, one of those situations I've always felt is tough to be around, and I imagine it's, as an official it is too, is if, you can't go, 3 wide to the inside or something like that, and you got cars pushing up, and well, do I go to the bottom and go around these guys? Do I take that chance? I always felt like that's always a weird situation.
Right. One of my calls that I made that stands out the most, I'm really good friends with the Weinkauf family, and Jason and I were really good friends, but obviously when the car goes on the racetrack, your friendship goes out the window. It's all about the rules and the situation on the track. So one night at Golden Sands, 2 guys were racing for the lead, and they kind of just pushed up a tiny bit in the corner, and Jason passed them both on the bottom. And back then, the 3 wide rule was in place, and I had to black flag Jason. And of course, he was very unhappy. That was with like 2 laps to go, and he ended up thinking he won the feature. And I said, "No, Jason, you passed."
Oh, so that was even for the lead.
Yeah,
too.
you passed 3 wide, and I'm sorry, man. You can't do that. It's black and white in the rules. And his dad hated me, and he hated me, and his wife hated me, and everybody hated me. But I'm like, hey, it's the same for you as it is for everybody else on the racetrack. That's the way racing has to be.
I got it once too in 4 cylinders out at Golden Sands. I can still remember that one, but yeah, it happens, and yeah, we all get put in those situations and predicaments, and rules are the rules. How many, are Golden Sands, WIR, Dallas Marshfield, are those the only tracks you've flagged at, or how widespread did flagging take you?
Well, back then it was 3 nights a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then one night at Golden Sands, Sean Stelzer came up to me and he said, "Hey, do you know that the NASCAR REMAX series is looking for a flagman, a starter?" And I said, "Oh, really?" So I knew Clem Drosty pretty well. Bob Abbott's was working for him.
Okay, yeah.
So I got a hold of Clem and I said, "I hear you're looking for a flagman." And he said, "Yeah, we are. Tom Powell was the series flagman, but he ended up stepping away in '99. And so I went and talked to Clem, and he called me back like a week later and said, "Okay, you got the job for the year 2000." So we started out at Rockford and all that, and that was really a fun, interesting job to work actually for NASCAR. You're a NASCAR official, and you you get to go to, you go to Rockford to start the season. We raced at Madison, WIR. I think the Dells had a show, but then you go to Elko. Then you go down to all the way to Ohio. We raced Mansfield, a couple other tracks there, and then you go all the way out to Colorado to race at Pikes Peak at the big track in conjunction with the back then was the Busch Series. Now the Xfinity Series raced at the same time we did. So that was a great experience, and I did that for 6 years.
6 years, okay.
Yeah, actually ended up to be the race director. When the race director stepped away, Clem said, "Well, now you got a chance to be you want to be the race director?" I said, "Sure." So got to sit up in a tower and make all the calls.
Gotcha.
Didn't have to sit out in the hot sun.
And then when you were doing that, did you have to put the local racing off to the side at that point?
To a point, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if there was a conflict with Golden Sands or Dells, I would just tell them, I'm sorry, I'm going to be gone. I think we had 13 or 14 races during the season, and of course most of them are on Friday and Saturday nights. So tell the local tracks, you've got a backup guy, and I'll be glad to work at the tracks when I'm there, but I have to follow the series too. So
okay, gotcha. And I know the one person I think you can't forget to bring up is your wife Linda. I mean, she comes along to most of everything.
Yeah, she when I met her, I actually met her at State Park Speedway.
Oh, really? Okay.
In 1980, in August of '80, I was pitting for Dick Trickle, and she was there with a friend, and I was rolling a tire to the tire compound, and I looked over, and there's this beautiful lady. I'm like, oh, hello, and then of course we all go to the same bar afterwards, and we started talking, and then we started going on a few dates. So, but yeah, early on she didn't work at the racetrack. She liked racing, was very supportive of me working at the tracks, but then after she had two boys they're young when I met her, and after they grew up, then she started working at the racetracks with me. She worked in like the pit gate and registration, but then she'd go up in the tower and do the scoring. And to this day, she still does that at Sands and Dells.
Yeah.
And she did work for the NASCAR series with us too in registration and scoring. So we got to travel to all the tracks together at that point. And that really made it a lot more fun.
Oh yeah, I'd imagine that's cool. I know there's just people always say that about my grandpa Refner and my grandma, like, I always see those two together. And I think my whole life it's always been the same thing, and just I think people probably say the same thing about you and Linda. Just you always see those two together at all the tracks, and I think that's cool.
Yeah,
I think that's really cool.
I think that's what got me keeping it going as long as I have, is the fact that we can do it together. I think if I would have had to leave home and be gone for 8-10 hours a night away from Linda, I don't know if I'd be doing it anymore. I'd kind of like, is it fun? Is it worth being away from your spouse?
Right.
She just doesn't want to come and sit in the stands every night or whatever. But the fact we can do it together really makes it still a lot of fun.
That's awesome. The going back a little further and talking about your dad going to auctioneer school. So, and then obviously you and your brother Mike followed suit. And what's that like being in an auction business? Then did you go to school to do? Because I've never heard it. Do you do the auctioneer voice?
Yeah. I can. So I went in 1980. I graduated from high school in '79, and Dad was already, they had already had the auction house for over 10 years. And Dad's like, well, you need to go to auction school. You're going to grow up in the auction company. And my brother had already gone to auction school. We went to Mason City, Iowa, and come back, and you learn voice training. You learn how to talk from your lungs, not your voice box, because your voice box will wear out after a couple hours. Your voice box will just quit working. Your throat will it won't work anymore. So you learn how to talk from they call it your diaphragm or your lungs or whatever. So you get trained in that, and you learn how to. The auction part of it is, they kind of talk about like auctioneers and horse race announcers are like the same breed. You got to be able to think fast, talk fast. Here goes horse number or horse name this, but you got to learn the chant, and you got to learn how to do all that stuff, keeping track of who's the high bidder and all that stuff. There's a lot that goes into it. But
how long of a schooling is that to learn all that?
It's only a 2-week Court.
okay,
You stay right there on site in like a school that has places for you to sleep and classrooms to go into.
Okay.
And the funny part is people say, well, how do you learn that auction thing? So we actually sat in class and did tongue twisters over and over. The big black bug bit a big brown bear. Big black bug bit a big brown bear. Things like that, kidding. Over and over and over. That's one of the things they train you. It was kind of fun.
I was always, you hear that people doing that, and I'm like, I always wondered, how do you just learn to do that, And
yeah, it's like it's repetition. It's like anything else. You just gotta start doing it, and the more you do it, the more you get accustomed to doing it. And I was an auctioneer of 1980 and I didn't do a lot of it. My dad was very active up until 2008. Well, then he had a heart attack and he passed away in 2009 from heart problems. And then Mike and I were thrust into the business like, okay, it's our business now. We have to keep this going. We have to know everything about it. So we would take turns auctioning. My mom was still active in the business until 2013, and then she got ill and passed away. So then it's my brother and I and Linda. She came to work for our company in 2009 when the paper mill started to make changes. She was in customer service in the paper mill then. So she lost her job, and we brought her in, and she was a big help in our business. And also my youngest stepson, he became a big part of it. And we have to hire people part-time to help with the auctions too. So but it was full-time for my brother and I from out of high school until we sold the business in 22.
Yeah, and that's I think about that too. Like it's really not that far off of flagging. It's a whole another skill set that's paying attention to a lot all at the same time. I mean, how is that to try and just keep track of?
It's a lot. It's you've got to,
because you don't want to miss somebody that's trying to win something. And
yeah, right. We've got these big bright bid cards that are about 10 or 12 inches tall with a number on them, and we tell people use your bid card if you want to bid. They're bright yellow. I can see that a lot better than I can see your finger waving. But when you've got 150, 175 people out there, it's a lot to cover. It really is.
Can you give us an example of an auctioneer?
Oh yeah, how about 25 and 30, and 35 and 40, and 45 and 50? Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I had never, all the years I knew you guys had that, I had never heard you do that. I had never been to an auction there, so
yeah.
I had a lot of friends that went, but I had never been there. So
yeah. I think over the years, I don't know what the last auction number was, but it was like 2,853 auctions in 53 years. So it was a lot. It was a lot over the years, but it was a very interesting business to be in. You walk into somebody's house and they say, clean everything out. You never know what you're going to find. You get amazed by what people collect or save or whatever. Some of it's really good, and some of it's a lot of stuff that ends up in the landfill.
Yeah. What's some of the most interesting stuff you've ever had to auction off?
I think one of the most interesting finds we had, we were in a house on the north side of Wisconsin Rapids, and this lady called us up and she said, my dad lived here for 50 years, go through the entire house, anything you find, take it and sell it. So we're cleaning out the bathroom, and Nick, my stepson, he opened up one of the drawers in the bathroom, and there was a baseball sitting in there. And Nick pulls it out, and he says, Dad, come here. I was in another room cleaning some stuff up or putting some stuff in boxes. And he says, look at this. And he's holding it. It was signed by Babe Ruth.
No kidding.
So we had it authenticated and ended up selling that, I think, for like $8,500.
Wow.
Something like that. So that was a heck of a...
Finding a bathroom drawer.
In a bathroom drawer.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah, we come across some crazy, interesting stuff. Somehow there was another house down by Witter Field, and a guy called us up in 97, and he said, the city of Rapids condemned my house. Like, condemned? What's the matter? Well, he gave us the address, and my dad and I drove down there. It was September, fairly warm out. And we kind of walk up to the doors, and it's like walking up to, like, the Munsters house. It's, like, just crazy bad conditions. I mean, everything is overgrown outside. And he opened the door, and he had a big, long beard that went down to, like, the middle of his middle of his waist. He hadn't shaved for like 20 years or whatever. And in the house was just, the conditions were just unbelievable. You can't, I've never seen anything like it before on TV or in person. Yeah. But we did find a lot of really interesting stuff, and the city did, because the conditions were so bad. They tore the house down. End of September, they just leveled it. And your house has got to be in pretty poor condition. To have that done. So
that's got to be interesting too. And hey, just someone's lived here for 50 years. Just go through it and check it all out. And
you never know what you're going to find. Just can't imagine. Like I said, some houses are so immaculate and beautiful that you could eat off the floors, and other ones you wouldn't want your worst enemy or an animal to even live in there. So
and you guys just retired from that business probably 2-3 years ago.
In 22, July 22 was our last auction. Yep, we
gotcha.
We had a big auction on Tuesday night, and Friday we closed on the property, and now they tore it down and they're building that car wash.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yep.
Yeah, 53 years. That's a long time though to see the business going. That's cool though.
Yeah, we were proud of it, but the building was old. The building was built in 38, and it was old building, hard to heat. But it served a purpose for us for all those years. So we were getting to the point. Mike's a little older than I am, and just got to the point where it'd be nice to not have to work 6.5, 7 days a week, plus the racing and all the other stuff that we were doing. So we got to the point.
That'll keep having to do that for that many 6.5 days out of the week, and then add the racing on top. It's a lot.
Well, that was the only reason I could really do the racing. I wasn't tied down to a job where I had to ask my boss for time off or take separate my schedule out. So it was a family business, and I just say, well, at 3:00 on Thursday I have to go to WIR. They all knew that. So we got our work done before I had to leave, and then of course start right back again Friday. And okay, got to be out to Sands by 3:00. Got to be Saturday. We got to be down to the Dells by whatever time we had to be there. So, but it was a family thing, and we all worked together to make it happen.
Now talking about when Dick Trickle would come over and play cribbage and have a few beverages with your parents, was that where your love of cribbage kicked off back then?
Yeah, my mom and dad taught me how to play when my brother and I were about 6-7 years old, and they said, we play cribbage all the time, you want to learn how to play? And we said, yeah, sure. So we sat down and we started playing, and became a lot of fun for the family. And both of my grandmothers I'd go to their house to visit them, and they're like, you want to play a game of cribbage? I said, sure. So it was just something we grew up with doing. And then in 1979, my grandmother, my dad's mom, she had relatives up in the Marinette, Menominee, Michigan, up in the UP, and she had found out that there was a tournament up there at the place called the Dome. And she said, well, I'll pay for your hotel room if you guys want to go up there and play in this tournament on the weekend. So we went up there and played in our first tournament, Mike and I, and just had a great time. Came back and told Mom and Dad, this is really a lot of fun. So then we started going to other tournaments in like Madison and Milwaukee, and it just kind of got more and more involved in playing in cribbage tournaments, and we're still doing that.
Okay. I guess kind of I've only played cribbage like 2 or 3 times. Definitely don't. What's the ins and outs to cribbage?
It's a game of strategy. You get dealt 6 cards. If you're playing, singles across from somebody, and you alternate the deal, and you get dealt 6 cards, and you got to try to keep your 4 cards that you think are going to be the best for you, and you throw 2 to the crib. And on your deal, it's your crib, and on the opponent's deal, it's the opponent's crib. And you don't have to get fantastic cards to win at cribbage. You just have to get a little bit better than your opponent.
Sure.
Obviously you want to get big hands, 16, 24 hands. Those are great to have, but you don't have to have them to win games of cribbage or tournaments, when you play. But it's a game of strategy. It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. Where's the farthest you've ever traveled to go to a tournament?
I just got back from Reno.
Okay.
I've been going out to Reno for over 30 years, and that's the world's largest tournament.
Okay.
And we're involved in help run the tournaments as well as playing them. So
okay, no kidding.
Linda's big into handling the registration of the players and handling the money, and you've got an entry fee, and then you pay out a certain amount to the people that go the farthest. Obviously, the person that wins the tournament makes the most money. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And what's the biggest tournament you've ever won?
In 2009, I went out to Reno, and there was 986 players, and I won that one.
Wow.
I paid $10,000 to win. Wow. So
That's cool.
It was an incredible highlight. I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would be able to win a tournament that big. The only bittersweet part of it was my dad was ill with heart trouble, and my mom was diagnosed with cancer. So Linda was home, like, taking care of them, taking care of the business, and Mike was also home. So none of my family was there to see that, and it was I wish they would. I had a lot of friends out there. I traveled with some people from town, that play in our cribbage club. They were there, but not having anybody from my family was kind of like, I wish somebody would have been there for my family to see it.
Sure.
It was just a unbelievable, crazy run of luck. I had to win 9 matches in a row from Saturday night to Sunday afternoon, and just was lucky enough to win them all and come home with a great, beautiful, beautiful trophy that I still am very proud to show.
Yeah, beating that many players. How many days did you say that it went across?
It started on Saturday morning at 8:30 in the morning. We start what's called a qualifying round, and you go and they take the scorecards when you're done. It's 20. You play 22 games. You get done about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They take the scorecards and they take the top 25%. So almost 250 people made it to the playoffs.
Okay.
So you got this, you still got a huge group of people. Mm-hmm. And they put your name on a great big bracket board, like the NCAA basketball board. You're matched up against another player. So if you win, you go forward. If you lose, you're done. It's best 3 out of 5. So I won my first 2 games Saturday night. You get up, start playing Sunday morning at 7:30. Then you made it to the top 32. Well, then you make it to the top 16, and then 8, 4, and I mean, the farther you go, the more pressure is, the more money there is, and it's just like, oh, can I possibly get lucky enough to win that tournament? And I did. That was just.
So then, how many matches did you say you had to play in the qualifying?
You play 22 games on a scorecard, and you keep track of how well you do.
Okay.
And then the top 25% of everybody there, so almost 250 people made the playoffs.
Okay.
So there's still a lot of people left.
Right.
And you gotta eliminate half of those people every round. Get half of them win and half of them lose. So then you advance down and. Got lucky enough to make it to the finals, and I was playing a really nice guy from Florida. I'd never seen him before in my life, but my cards just stayed good, and I was lucky enough to win that tournament. So.
Cool. Yeah, I know that had to been a huge highlight. Because you'd been going. How many years had you played in that tournament prior to winning that one?
I had been going out there since I'd say early 90s, like 92 or 93 was my first year, and. Been trying, had a little success, make the playoffs once in a while, but never got real far into the playoffs until that year. And then that year, just everything worked out just right. So
okay, so you had never even gotten, what was the farthest you had gotten along in?
Probably, I think maybe once I made the top 16 or 32.
Okay,
but at that point, you're playing against the best players in the United States, and you really gotta. You got to have the luck of the cards, and you got to try not to make any mistakes. And
sure,
in 2009, it was just
went your way.
Was meant to be.
Yeah. How does someone get involved in cribbage at tournaments, clubs? How does that always like different sanctions? How does that kind of work?
Well, the American Cribbage Congress is the governing body that we play under, and there's about 6,000 members in the United States right now.
Okay.
And then if you're a member, you get a magazine in the mail every month called Cribbage World, and it tells you where all the tournaments are coming up. There's like a big list in the back of the magazine, and it'll tell you there's tournaments in Wisconsin at Madison, Lake Delton, Black River Falls, up at Lac de Flambeau at the casino, Milwaukee. There's tournaments all over the place now that you decide which ones you want to play in, and go and pay your entry fee and see what happens.
Cool.
But they do that all over the United States. There's literally about right now, give or take, about 200 sanctioned tournaments in the United States every year. So every weekend there's usually 2, 3, 4 tournaments somewhere in the country.
Okay. Huh. It's neat. I actually have one of our friends there that enjoy playing. She's actually a teacher, and she just got a grant where she's a 5th grade teacher, just got cribbage boards for all her students, and she's looking to have someone come and help teach the kids how to play cribbage. Maybe I'll have to link you up with that if that's something you'd ever be interested in.
Yeah, my brother and I actually did that years ago. It was the old Children's Choice School, I think, and they asked us to come in and show the kids how to play, to give them the fundamental basics of how the game is. And we did that for a part of the season, and that was a lot of fun. Yeah, if they're interested in having somebody show them how to play, you certainly can.
Might have to do that.
Yeah,
cool. It how long did it take you to win your first tournament?
It took me over 10 years. Well, back in the 70s and 80s, there weren't near as many tournaments back then as there are now.
Okay.
There was like one at Marinette, maybe one at Madison, one at Milwaukee, and I think in 1991 I won my first tournament, and it wasn't a very big tournament. It was about 50 players, but it's still cool. You end up Sunday winning the tournament and a little bit of prize money. It's like, let's go to the next one and the next one and the next one. So yeah.
I was curious if that kind of worked that way. Like, hey, I did pretty good at this one. I'm gonna go to the next one and the next one.
You get a hot streak. The one thing that I remember about the year that I won the one in Reno, I came back and there was another one a month later in Wapaka and ended up winning that one too. And it's like, wow, the cards are really in my favor right now. But as a card player, or cribbage or poker or anything, the cards are going to come, and then all of a sudden they're gonna stop. It's just there's no way you can go to tournaments and just think you're going to win every one of them. You can only hope to do good here and there. The cards will be up and the cards will be down. That's just the way they are.
So what are some of the things that when did you figure out, like, hey, I'm pretty good at this?
I think growing up, playing with the adults, and I beat somebody like your parents, and then you'd play with your grandparents and you'd beat them, and they're like, they gave you a little confidence and a little pat on the back. Yeah, you're pretty good. You're a pretty good player.
Is that why? Was it your grandma that paid for your hotel rooms? Okay.
Yeah.
Is that why she did that? Was because she thought you and Mike were pretty good? And
because she lived in the Parkview Apartments in town, and I'd go over there as a kid, and I said, Grandma, do you want to play a game of cribbage? Yeah, let's play. And played through 3-4 games, and she's like, yeah, you guys are pretty good cribbage players. And when she found out there was a tournament up there in Marinette, she said, I think you guys should go up and give that a try. So that was our first experience in tournament cribbage.
That's cool. What are some of the secrets to being good at cribbage?
Kind of knowing what your opponent has by their demeanor and the way they play and stuff like that, and it doesn't mean anything to the average person that doesn't play, but you play a game, it's either you play offensively if you're trying to get out from a certain point, or you play defensively if you're trying to keep your opponent from going out or whatever. It's just like I said, it's quite a bit of strategy, and the people that know how to play the right way, and there's some extremely successful people. There's a few people that have won over 100 tournaments.
Okay.
I've won 14 tournaments over the last whatever years, and very fortunate to say that. But there's guys out there that have won 110, 115 tournaments, and obviously they have incredible card sense and sense with numbers and know how to play the game the right way. So I'm pretty envious of some of those guys.
Sure. Was that always a kind of like a winter time thing that you filled your time with when you weren't at the racetrack?
Yeah. I rarely, well, obviously with the racing schedule, I rarely play anything in the summertime. It's usually from September until April or so. We play in tournaments. I got one coming up in Deadwood. We're driving out there, and there's actually 3 separate tournaments in 4-day period.
That's a pretty famous town for poker and stuff like that anyway.
Yeah, and now that a few years ago a guy started tournaments out there, and I said, that's not too far, we can drive out there, and we ended up getting asked to help run those tournaments too. So we run the tournaments and I play in them, and they're a lot of fun too.
Okay, gotcha. I'm gonna go back into talking about working at a racetrack and flagging a little bit. What was the hardest racetrack you ever had to flag at? What makes flagging at a particular track more challenging than the other?
I think the bigger the track, the harder it is to see what's going on.
Okay.
I worked the Milwaukee Mile, been in the flag stand there. The small tracks like Golden Sands, Dells, Slinger are fairly easy. Everything is like within just a quick glance, and you can see what's going on. You see what trouble is happening, or there's what oil or water on the track or anything like that. And the bigger tracks like Milwaukee, Odessa, those places, it's really tough to see sometimes what's happening out there. And you never want to put a driver in jeopardy of an accident or injury or anything like that because you failed to see something that was laying on the track or some fluid or anything like that. So you try to be as quick as you can on the ball to throw a yellow or tell the tower. Now it's all race control at every track we go to, but you tell the tower what's going on out there because sometimes they can't see it either too.
Sure, yeah, I guess that's different. I thought maybe a larger track would be easier because the cars get a little more spaced out and then everything doesn't seem like it's all happening right on top of each other. But
yeah, you got a little more time to react at a place like WIR or Madison. You got a little more time, but you just can't see everything. It's not as close to you visually as the smaller tracks like most of them around here.
Sure. Now, when you were doing I remember a time, I think it was several years back, Golden Sands. You ended up getting hit in the flag stand, right? Yeah, it was a little while ago, right?
Yeah, it was. At least 10 years ago. So it was a heat race, and it was like 3 or 4 laps to go, and I think Kirby Kurth was racing, and the cars are coming out of turn 4, and all of a sudden something hits me right at the top of my forehead, right where my hair meets the skin. And I'm like, I've been hit by rubber and stuff before, and it hurt.
And would you just wear like safety glasses at that point, or?
I don't. It was nighttime. I don't even think I had my safety glasses on, which my wife, of course, yelled at me for that. She's like, "You should always have your safety glasses on." So anyway, something hit me right there, and dang it, that hurt a little bit. Well, we only got 3 or 4 laps to go, no big deal. All of a sudden, I feel something running down my face, and it's blood. I'm like, oh boy, I gotta. I can't stop the race just for me. I wasn't hurt that bad, but I had a handkerchief in my back pocket, and I pulled it out and I held it on my forehead until finished flagging the race. White checkered, race is done, and my wife, she was sitting in the stands. She wasn't working at the track back then, and I said, "Come up here. You got to come up here." I told the guys on the ramp, hold the cars for a second, guys. I got something going on. So okay. So she come up and she's like, "What the heck?" I said, "Yeah, I got hit by a pretty good sized rock, and blood is running down the side of my face." And she says, she called Craig Bassuener down, and Craig, you gotta flag this. Pat's got to go to see a medic or something, see if he needs stitches. So I think the ambulance actually came down on the track, and I got in it, went to the pits, and they're like, "Yeah, you really should go get stitches." I said, "No, so they ended up putting gauze on there, and they gave me a baseball cap, and I put it on and kept that on there the rest of the night, and it was fine. But they actually wanted me to go to the ER and get a couple of stitches in my forehead. And I'm like, nah, I got racing to do. I'm not going to the doctor.
I felt like was that I remember that. I just remember that happening. And was that the first time you ever? I mean, did you ever wear any protection normally, like the Remax, like for NASCAR? Did you? Have to?
Yeah. I had. And I still do in my flag bag. I have eye protection, and sometimes I'm pretty good about it. When there's a lot of oil dry and stuff out there, that stuff can blow in your eyes and really cause a lot of problems. So I do have safety glasses on, and I really should be a little bit better. But normally during the day, I've got sunglasses on until it gets dark. So at least I've got that on for part of the day. But yeah, That could have been pretty bad if that would have hit me in the eye. Lord knows how much damage that could have done.
Oh yeah. What have you enjoyed the most about flagging? What's really made that enjoyable just to keep doing that?
The people, the drivers, the crew, the fans. The the track owners and the series promoters. It's you know as well as I do. Once you go to the track, it's like a big happy family. 99% of the time, everybody's getting along good. It's a big party. It's a lot of fun. There's only one ultimate winner in every division every night, which is great. But you see people that you haven't seen all winter, and you just connect. Boom! It's just like, hey, how's it going? How's the family? Everybody just gets along so well.
So even as a flagman, it still gets in your blood, and you just keep coming back for more.
Oh yeah. It's like I said, it's going to be 33 years at Golden Sands, and pretty close to that at the Dells, and I always look forward to that first race of the year, and from there on, it seems like the season goes by pretty darn quick, and but yeah, just meeting all the people and seeing all the people, it's just so much fun.
I mean, when you're getting ready to do a big race, I mean, are you get kind of amped up, or are you just pretty calm, cool, and collected?
I still get a little bit jittery, when that big field comes out there and say it's a big money race to win. Yeah, you get amped up. It's compare it to being like a football player going into the Super Bowl or big game or something like that. Yeah, you get the nervous jitters, and another really fun part about being a flagman, and they do this at a lot of tracks, is they'll have an honorary starter come down.
Okay.
For the features, and you got to tell them what to do. Wave the flag. Don't try to get fancy, and ultimately, please don't drop my flag. That's the only one I have. I've only got one green flag here, so please don't drop it on the racetrack. But the look in their eyes, and the you can just see how excited they are to be down there during. Here come the cars out of turn 4, and they get to wave that flag, and they just stand there with the biggest grin that you could ever imagine somebody having. It's just so fun.
Yeah.
And I've had them all the way from like little 4 or 5 year old kids all the way up to 85, 90-year-old people, and they all have the same big smile on their face when they get to do it.
I would imagine that would be cool to get a part of that. That's neat. What's been one of your favorite experiences that you've gotten, that where flagging's taken you? Probably quite a few.
I like to see the little guy who's never won a race win his first feature.
Yeah,
him or her. There's a lot of female drivers out there, and you can hear the announcer saying, "This person's been racing X amount of years and has this could be the first one," and that driver comes across that finish line and has that win, and it's just like, oh, good for them. Your grandfather, Dick, Marv, Larry Degens, Jimmy Bach, all those guys, they had hundreds of feature wins. Good for them. They were great for racing too. But that new driver that gets that first win, that is really exciting to see.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, getting to flag some of the big NASCAR races back when Dick Trickle was still racing. That was a big thrill too. Like down at Odessa, I was in the flag stand for when he raced, because his career was ending as mine was like getting started. So that was a big thrill too. But I love to see those underdogs win, and just when those drivers get out of the car last year, Ryan Farrell won a big race at Dells.
Yeah.
And it was super hot. I mean, it was like in the 90s in September. It's like, holy moly, this is just a brutal day. And he jumps out of his car, he runs up through the gate, and he flies up into the flag stand, and he gives me a great big hug. I'm like, that was really fun. It's like, most drivers are down there, they're talking to the announcer and doing their thing on the track. He just came up, he grabbed the checkered flag out of my hand, and he's waving it to the crowd, and he's just having a wonderful time. And I just love to see guys that are that excited about winning a race.
Yeah, no, exciting moments like that are always that's always special for sure.
Yeah.
Now, your time spent with Dick and helping him, how many, did you go to a lot of races with them or just a handful?
When we could, we were busy with our business, and that was our priority. But, the October race at Odessa, Missouri, for some reason, my brother and I and John Nolinsky said, that was a big race. That's a 400-lap race on a half mile, so he needs help. He needs pit crew help. He needs a lot of help. And there was probably a pit crew of maybe 8 to 10 guys that all went down. We drove Dick's he had a little tan Chevy van, and Dick said, "Yeah, you take my van, and we'll meet down there, and we all stay in the same hotel and go to the track and during the day." And just so ended up that he won that race, and that's a memory that I'll never forget as a 18 or 19-year-old kid. That was just amazing.
Yeah, was it hot down there? Every story I've ever heard from down there is it's always hot.
Not in October. It was really nice.
October,
we had shirt sleeves. It was late October. I think almost around Halloween.
Okay.
So down there it was probably in the 60s. It was really nice. At night it would get cool, but it was down there that the weather was nice. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Went to quite a few places with Dick. Mostly local tracks.
Okay.
State Park, Dells, Golden Sands, stuff like that. Because it was so much easier to go to the local tracks than to travel, even like Slinger and Rockford and stuff. Every once in a while we'd go, but we couldn't go all the time.
Was there ever any? Was there ever an event that really stuck out in your time helping him? He always had so many things to say, and he was.
Yeah. Well, the one in Odessa was amazing because, like I said, there was drivers from all over the United States there. You've got Rusty Wallace, you've got Darrell Waltrip, you've got these big hotshot guys trying to win this big race. And back then in 1980, I think the race paid like $12,000 to win, which nowadays that's huge money.
Yeah.
$12,000 to win a race at a short track now is a lot of money. Back then that was serious money.
Right.
And just winning that race and beating all those drivers from all over the country was just so much fun to see.
Yeah. Is there a track where you wish you could have flagged at that you haven't?
I think Slinger.
Slinger?
Yeah,
okay.
Yep. My dad started taking me to Slinger when I was a kid, probably 9, 10 years old, and that's just a wild, fun, crazy track to watch races at. I can't imagine how crazy it is when you're in the flag stand there. But yeah, Slinger, I've never been in the flag stand at Slinger. I think that would be a good time.
Yeah. You're talking when you're doing some of the race director stuff with NASCAR, what was the biggest difference? Obviously you're not using flags at that point, but what were the challenges with being a race director versus, a flagman?
You've really got to know the rules. They hand you a rule book, and any infraction that happens, if you pass the pace car, or you're pitting too early or things like that, you've got to know what penalty to tell the officials in the pits, or hold this car.
It's got to get handed out immediately.
Yeah, it's not. You don't get time to open a book and start looking around for the rules.
Yeah.
You got to know what's going on. So that was kind of a challenge. They give you the rule book and they say you got to learn the procedures part of it, and you can't. Especially when you got other NASCAR officials from other series standing behind you, you gotta know what's going on. And you gotta know what to do. And
were you on your own in that decision making? When it came to that too, or did you have another person that was kind of also watching and knew the things?
Yeah, well, Clem Drosty, the series director, he was always in the tower. He was pretty good about helping out, but he would never get on the radio and say anything. He always left it up. He'd give me advice, and he'd say, this needs to happen, or but he would never physically grab the radio and take control. He would always leave it up to the race director to make the ultimate, talk to the officials or people that he needed to talk to about making a decision. So he was pretty good about helping out, though. He'd been around racing forever. He's been involved in it, so I think since the 1960s.
Yeah, I'll think of a rule book. Did you have to go through? Did it take you a while to really feel comfortable knowing all the stuff in it?
Yeah. It's got quite a bit of stuff in it. I don't think I have it anymore, but about procedures and what can happen during the races. You've got to know the stuff. One thing I remember that happened, we had a big NASCAR race at Madison, and on the first lap there was a huge pileup. Right, taking the green flag for the race. Somebody didn't go, or somebody changed lanes and caused a huge pileup.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of looked at each other in the tower and said, well, what do we do now? We actually had to go back and kind of figure out what the procedures were on how to sort the whole mess out and what the right thing to do was for the drivers and everybody involved. So,
just because the wreck coming to the green.
Yeah, you don't see that very often. At a short track, okay, people involved in the caution or cars that are wrecked that can't continue, they go off. But NASCAR has a pretty strict procedure on how things are done at that point. So that was kind of a little sticky part of that race. But I think we ultimately found out what to do and restarted the race, and everything turned out okay. But you hate to see that happen for a driver. He doesn't even get one lap in, and a whole bunch of cars are wrecked. Just disappointing for everybody.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. What did you prefer, flagging over the race tractor, John?
It's a toss up. There's on the really hot days where the flagman's got to stand out in the sun when it's in the 90s, or I think I worked 2 racetracks, one at Marshfield, one at Golden Sands, where I started the day where it was over 100 degrees, and that's just brutal.
Yeah,
you're stuck out in the hot sun, and the racetrack's hot, the cars are hot, everything about it is hot, and those are tough.
Sun's beating off the pavement.
So if you got a chance to go up into the tower where the air conditioning's running, it's a pretty easy choice to make.
Sure,
but I still enjoy being out in a beautiful summer day, and the cars are going by like right there, and like the people that come up to start the races, the honorary starters, are like, "You got a really good view here." I said, "Yeah, I know." It's really kind of a fun place to be when it's a nice summer day or a summer evening.
Yeah. How long do you think you'll keep flagging for?
I always tell my wife, and how long do we want to keep doing this? And I think as long as we're healthy and we can do it together, a few more years, I'll just say.
Sure. No, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah. To be involved in anything that long is definitely something special. That's cool. Yeah, especially if you're enjoying it. And
I made so many friends at the racetracks with not only fellow officials, and like I said, even people in the stands. They'll come up to me, and I'm taking a break. I'm going up the hill to get a drink of water or whatever, and they come up out of the blue, and I've never seen them before, and they pat me on the back and say, "Man, you're doing a great job." And I'm like, "Oh, I really appreciate that," because it's not a job you get a lot of. You got nobody ever brings.
It's not glamorous.
Nobody ever brings you flowers and pats you on the back very often. But when somebody out of the blue comes up in the stands and say, "You do a really good job," that really makes you feel good.
Yeah, I would imagine. And out of all your time spent around racetracks, did you ever hop in a hobby stock or anything like that when you were young?
I got to race an officials race once at the Dells.
Okay.
So they had an enduro down there, and they said anybody who works on the racetrack can go down and grab a car. So I'm like, that sounds like fun. So this guy had this blue Monte Carlo, and it looked like a pretty good car. And he actually had a big orange pumpkin on top of it. I'll never forget this. So all the officials from the Dells got to race in this race, and it was only, I think it was 15 laps. But come around the pace lap, and we're behind this little truck, and he pulls off the track, and the flagman gives us the green. So I put it to the floor. My throttle stuck. My throttle was stuck wide open the whole race. And I'm like, I went up and down the track. I couldn't get it. I couldn't turn the car off. If I turn the car off, it's going to stop. And I'm actually passing cars. And I think I ended up in third place in that race, but I raced that whole 15 laps with a throttle stuck in that car, and it was a crazy experience.
Was it stuck wide open?
Wide open,
and it was just use the brake to slow.
2 feet on the brake in every corner to try to get the car to slow down enough to where I could turn it. But it was so close to being out of control. It was crazy. But I had a ball. I had a ball racing.
Yeah, what a one and only racing experience.
Yeah. I'm lucky I didn't destroy the guy's car for me. Wouldn't have, because the enduro was the race after ours, and if I had wrecked his car, he'd have been pretty unhappy with me. But that was really. I did have. You remember the white 4-cylinder Saturns?
Oh yeah, the Budweiser cars.
I got to race those too.
Okay.
And they said any track official can race. I ended up getting to the finals, and I was leading the final race, and the guy spun me out.
Because they would just do they used to head to head.
Yeah, it was 2 cars at a time.
Yep.
Like elimination races.
Okay.
And I made it to the finals, and this guy ended up spinning me out, and I don't know what they didn't restart the race. They just gave him the win. So I thought, but that was a lot of fun. Just you get a real appreciation of what race drivers have to do to actually succeed in racing.
I like asking that question of people that are involved in racing, but aren't known as a race car driver. Like, you ever get behind anything and get out there? It's always interesting. If you can, because so many of us, that's why it's interesting to ask you these questions. It's like, I have no perspective what it's like to be a race director, a promoter, being in a flag stand, working the corner. I have no perspective of that. So it's always cool to see if someone gets the opportunity to be on that other side of things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I know the one job at a racetrack I've always thought was must take a little bit of ability. And I mean, as a driver, I've gotten a feel for it, is the worker that will work practice at Golden Sands that has to send a super late out there when that track is just full of cars and trying to time that guy to get out there.
Yeah. I've done some of that for the practice sessions, and it's a big responsibility, and you never want to send a car out at a dangerous point. You don't ever want to put a driver in that situation. The driver on the track has got the right of way, and the driver on top, he's got to be. You got to be super, super careful about doing that. And there's a lot of tracks where you can't even blend cars in. It's just not worth the danger that it happens. But yeah, that's a pretty important, pretty stressful job at that point. And of course, you're out there, and if God forbid anybody would lose control, you really got nowhere to run or hide. They're right there at the top of the track. So
right.
It's a safety thing as well. So.
Have you ever had any calls as a flagman where you left the racetrack and you're like, man, I wish I would have made a different choice?
Yeah, once in a while you feel like, okay, you missed.
Maybe you missed something.
You missed the oil coming out of this car, and all of a sudden there's 5 cars piled up into the wall. That makes you feel pretty, pretty humble. You're like, dang it. If I'd have thrown the flag 10 seconds earlier, none of those cars would have got wrecked. If I'd have just, you really don't. Sometimes you have almost no time to think. You got to make a split-second decision, or if there's a piece of something on the track you don't think is going to hurt a car, and a guy ends up running it over and blowing a tire and costing him a race. You kind of think to yourself, next time I'm gonna be safe rather than sorry. So that has happened a few times, but
yeah, it's interesting. Oil on the track, and stuff like that's hard to catch, and it all happens so fast, and sometimes it's like I wouldn't. It's interesting to hear your perspective. Like, oh man, I wish I would have caught that to save those drivers, and sometimes it's like, well, that stuff just kind of happens, and it's I look at it as like, oh, it's just racing, and
yeah. Another thing that happens is I remember at a NASCAR track, this guy started smoking, and it's like, he spent all weekend getting his car ready. He's in the middle of the race, and he starts smoking. Well, you can't stop the race to go look at a car that's smoking. You've got to make a decision. Okay, is this car safe, or is it gonna drop fluid, or is it gonna explode and hurt somebody? And I remember having him black flagged. That was the race director, and he was so angry with me. And I'm like, hey, I have to do what I have to do, man. I didn't want your car to come apart and cause a big wreck or have catch on fire or something like that. And he was really unhappy with me. But ultimately, you just have to kind of do what you think is right.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just cool to hear about all those split-second decisions, and those tough decisions. Whether you're a driver, there's just a lot of tough decisions that go on at a racetrack or up in the tower. Is there anything at a officiating type of role at a racetrack that you wish you would have gotten a chance to do, whether it was for NASCAR at a local track that you haven't been involved with?
When you start out at a series like NASCAR, you think, well, this could ultimately end up to be, maybe something bigger or more,
Yeah. Did you ever wonder, like, hey, would I be flagging in the Cup Series?
Yeah,
or?
exactly. You think, hey, is this going to lead to maybe next, step up into the trucks or the Xfinity or the Cup? And actually, there's a guy that I trained in the NASCAR Midwest Series that ended up working for Cup.
Okay.
And his name is Andy Ashbeck. He's from Wisconsin Rapids. So he, when I moved up into be the race director job, Andy had trained with me at Oktoberfest, the last race of the year in 2000. And so when I moved up into race director, he became the starter, the flagman. So he did that until the series ended in 2006. And he actually stepped up into the national series then at that point.
Okay.
Not as a starter then, but mainly as a tech guy and a pit road official. You start out in certain areas, and now every once in a while I'll turn one of the races on, the trucks, Xfinity or Cup, and there's Andy. He's in the flag stand.
Oh, he's still doing it. Okay.
Yeah, so
that's
he's
cool.
he's a national series official, and I think that would have been fun. I think the one misconception that people think, okay, it's this glamorous lifestyle. Okay, well, if you think getting up at 5 a.m. and going to work at a 95-degree track all day is glamorous, well, you got another thing coming. I remember a race out in Colorado. We were on the job at 6 a.m. and we didn't get it back in our hotel room until 12:30 that night. And you're at the track all day. You're a NASCAR official, and it's pretty cool a lot of times, but it's not quite as glamorous as a lot of people think.
Yeah, and if it rains and you got to wait out rain, your workday's just getting a little longer.
Well, yeah. Like one time at Gateway, it was a brutally hot day in the summer, and all of a sudden they say, run for cover. There's a tornado, and here it comes. And we went underneath the.
Could you see it coming?
Well, you could. It was one of them days where it was just so brutally hot, and then all of a sudden here comes this cold front, and you can just kind of see it and feel it coming. So we ran for cover, and we actually went for shelter underneath the tunnel that goes out of the racetrack. Okay. But because there's really no good place at a racetrack that's really that safe to hide. But everybody went scurrying for cover, and it was a tornado right in the area that day. That was pretty crazy when that happened. But yeah, it's a lot of interesting things that go on.
Yeah, in talking about training someone how to be a flagman, for anyone that's ever looking to get into flagging, be a flagman, what's the biggest piece of advice you'd have for someone that wants to get into flagging or any sort of racetrack officiating?
You got to really have a lot of confidence. You can't, if a fan or a driver or a crew member think you made the wrong call, just have the ability to say why you made the call you made. In short tracks, there's a lot of things that go on that if you don't have the confidence to stand up to the people and tell them why you think you did it that way, you probably shouldn't be in that type of job. Just have the confidence in your ability. I would not want to put a kid, an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid who's never worked at a racetrack in the flag stand. I mean, that would create so much anxiety. I don't think they could mentally handle it. Work in a different aspect of a racetrack for a while, and then transition into that job if at all possible. You just when I was thrown into it in '92, it was like, oh my God, can I handle it? Can I handle the stress? Can I handle all the things that are going to go on at a racetrack? And but luckily now the flagman doesn't have to make all the decisions. It's race control, and the flagman and the corner workers are all working together to ultimately figure out what's going on out there. So.
Sure. And actually going back to that first experience flagging, I probably didn't ask enough about it. Did you just like, hey, I think I got a sense of what I have to do? Or
well, I think it helped going to the races, as many races as I did as a kid growing up. I'd go and I'd watch everything about. I was so interested in everything about a racetrack and racing and all that. And watching it, knowing a lot about how races were run really helped a lot. Like I said, I wouldn't want to take a young kid now and just throw him up there and say, okay, now it's you got to make all these decisions, and it'd be very hard. I worked with Alex from the truck series. He started flagging as a young man. I mean, he was really, really interested in becoming a flagman. And I worked with him at WIR when he was still in high school, and we flagged a few years together. And he's just he's an amazing guy, very dedicated to the sport, travels all over the United States to work at some series. And, you know, that's the kind of guy most racetracks would love to have as a flagman. You know,
sure,
he's still a young man. You know, I think he's barely out of college right now. But you don't see many young people that interested in that kind of a job right now. You know, just takes the right person to want to get up there and dedicate hours and hours to it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you know, because I've definitely never, you know, it's not like I've seen 30 different flagmen over the course of my racing career. It's been you and a couple others, you know, and I also haven't ventured off too far either. But it's definitely something you don't see a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a pretty small group of people. You know, it really is. You see, you know, Tom Powell was flagman at Slinger and was the NASCAR series, Midwest series for a few years, and he just decided he stepped away from that. But Tommy White from Illinois. He does the ARCA Midwest series.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. Alex Gilhart with the trucks. There just aren't a lot of flagmen standing around looking for jobs and racetracks to work at. So it's a pretty small group of guys.
How do you begin training someone on flagging? You know, what do you start teaching them?
Basically, kind of. When cars are racing, you know, there can be cars spread out all over the racetrack to a certain point. You kind of, you know, you get a sense of where problems might happen.
Okay,
that's the thing. A good flagman sense where something might go wrong, and cars might end up, you know, spinning out or crashing into each other or whatever. Get a sense of where that might happen, because obviously, as a racer, you know that on a small track. In a 100-lap race, pretty much at the end of the race, they're going to be everywhere. And you don't have to watch the leaders. You don't have to watch the guys up front all the time. You get a sense for looking at where there might be trouble, and that takes a little bit of getting used to, you know.
Yeah, and when you're flagging, is that kind of, you know, is that what you're, what are you always looking at and trying to focus on? Is it, you know, I think as a, you know, if I'm spectating a race, you know, I'm watching the guy that's poking his nose inside it, you know, is that where you're kind of starting to look like, something might go on here?
If you sense there's problems, if you think, if the guy that's trying to move up the pack, that's trying to get inside of somebody for 5th place or 8th place or whatever, and you think that he might be a little bit too aggressive, well, you kind of keep an eye on him until, you know, maybe he'll make a pass and then he'll get out on his own. Well, okay, that problem is solved. And, you know, I think the most angry I ever got at a race driver was at a race at Golden Sands, and there was a driver who the leaders were going to come up and lap him. And it was a big race. It was a series race. And he'd just run right down the middle of the racetrack. And so you get the blue and yellow flag over, and, you know, most drivers will see that and go, that's probably for me. You know, you don't have communication. Back then, we didn't have communication with the drivers. There was no race divers or anything like that. Flag, you know, lap after lap after lap. And this guy, all of a sudden, 1st through 5th place are piled up behind this guy, and he can't get around him. So finally, I threw the yellow. And I went down there with my black flag, and I slammed it on his hood, and I said, "You get off my racetrack." I said it a lot louder than that. And I might have put a few other choice words in there. I said, "You get off my racetrack. You're done."
Yeah.
And he just looked at me and was like, I said, if you don't know what you did wrong, you know, I'll tell you later.
Yeah, it's not where you need to be right now.
You're done. You're done racing this race. And there was about 2,000 people in the stands, and I think every one of them cheered pretty loud that this guy was he was screwing up the race for the leaders pretty bad, and they wanted him off the track as much as the fans wanted him off. I wanted him off, and that was something I'll never forget. I was pretty angry at that driver.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. How do you, if something happens after a race, how do you deal with an angry driver? What's the best way to deal with one of us?
Just tell them my point of view. Always it's never anything personal. I've made great friends at racetracks, and I've got guys that I would I'd rather not ever go near. You know, just there's you can tell their personality. They're always they always think you're out to get them or something like that. But ultimately, if you have something you need to talk to them about, you just have to, you know, swallow hard, go down there and say, this is why I did this. This is, you know, I felt you did this, or you made this mistake, or you know, you did something. But like I said, it's never personal. It's always just, this is the way we have to run the racetrack in order to make it fair for everybody.
Sure.
And they ultimately, almost every one of them understands that in the long run. And, you know, you can go down on the racetrack, or you can talk to a driver during the heat of the battle, and they've turned beet red. They're spitting and swearing and everything else.
Yeah.
And the races get done, and you go see them 45 minutes later, and they're all fine with it. They're a totally different person at that point.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Usually it works out okay.
A little bit of time usually helps in those scenarios.
Yeah.
You ever have anyone march right up in the flag stand?
I've had a dad of a driver at WIR threaten to come over across the track, because that's where they pit in the infield, and he said he was going to come over and take care of me, and I said, well, I don't know if that would be a smart idea. You know, I'm not a kung fu black belt or anything else, but I think I could handle myself. But I've never had a driver. I've had a couple fans come to the bottom of the track, and usually they've had maybe one or two beers.
Sure.
And they give me a piece of their mind, and I'm like, you know, sometimes I just,
hey, thanks for your opinion.
Thank you. See ya. I got races to run here. So.
Yeah.
But nobody's ever physically put their hands on me.
Yeah.
And I feel,
well, that's good.
I feel like I can negotiate any situation within reason to a point.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, well, that's good. Man, I loved hearing so much about the cribbage and, you know, the auctioning stuff, and and sharing that perspective of flagging and being a race director, and what's that like. Is there anything else, you know, really cool you've been involved with that, you know, that people might not know about? Or are those?
Well, that takes up a lot of our
time. I was going
time.
to say, I don't know what else you'd really fit in there.
What I'd want to branch out. You know, I've never been a hunter. That's never interested me. My wife and I like to take trips. We've got some bucket list stuff that we're going to be doing. You know, I've been all over the United States playing cribbage. Been to a lot of different racetracks racing. We got. We've got a big tournament coming up next year in Niagara Falls, New York. She's never been there, so we're gonna take some time.
Does she play cribbage at all?
She knows how to play. She's more on the organization end of it than she is on the play. She's not a tournament player. That way, she doesn't have the confidence to play in tournaments, but she knows how to play the game. But we like to take trips. We like to go on cruises. We've cruised to Hawaii. We've cruised. Quite a few different places, and we really enjoy that. You know, we do that together and just get away from the real world, especially in the wintertime. You know, you go down to Florida in January, and then you go on a cruise ship, and you forget about the 25 below in Wisconsin.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a lot of fun too. So yeah, we like to travel, and just other than that, we're pretty darn busy doing the racing and the cribbage end of it. So
yeah, oh, that's cool. Well, I don't think there's anything else that, you know, I had to ask, and I really appreciate you sharing all that, you know, like I said, perspective from a flagman and hearing what that's like, because you know, when you agreed to come on, I was like, man, I kind of got a lot of questions on it. You know, I've never really asked anybody that's, you know, been on that side of it. You know, I've spent all this time at racetracks and being in races, and you know, and being in an event that's being controlled by race directors and flagmans, but I have no clue what it's like and don't know a lot about it. But
we don't know what it's like to be a race driver.
Yeah,
not very much anyway.
Yeah,
you know, I've sat in a couple of super lates, but it's so intimidating to think that car is going to be going 120 miles an hour in a couple of minutes. It's pretty crazy. You guys have the you know, the nerve and the ability to make that thing go around without ever running into anybody else and taking a trophy home. That's got to be a lot of fun too. So
yeah, for sure. Well, I think I think all of us as racers, we appreciate all the time and dedication that you've put into racing. And whether it's been in the NASCAR or around here in Wisconsin, and definitely couldn't do it without you, and you definitely helped put on the show. And so I know from a racer's perspective, thank you for all the time and commitment you've put into racing and continue to do, and your wife as well, and your brother Mike. So I think that's fantastic, and thank you for coming on Speed and Grease and sharing all that awesome information with us.
Thanks for having me, Colin. I had a good time.
All right, wonderful. Thanks, Pat.
You bet.